The Bryce Eldridge outfield convo is getting real, but what does that mean for Elliot Ramos? Let's talk about it right here on Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, y'all? I'm Alan Stiles. Welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, thanks to you, the #1 sports podcast network. On the show, we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that combines passion, analytics with the eye test, and a little bit of fun. I'm from the Bay, but I live in Sacramento now, and I host a show on Sacktown Sports 1140, as well as emceeing Sacramento Rivercast games. All in all, I'm lucky enough to cover a team I've been a fan of all my life. Today, we are discussing the Bryce Eldridge outfield move being very real. Vitello and some notes that he has had so far coming out of the very beginning of pitchers and catchers reporting and spring training getting underway. And last but not least, Jeff Passan has an update on the lockout situation, which might make you feel better or worse about the following season when things could get a little bit squirrely. Okay, let's start here. And, basically everybody has written an article about this. We talked about it a couple days ago. But now it feels like this thing is really getting some legs because you're seeing Bryce Eldridge taking fly balls immediately in the outfield. So now, like I said, you can choose from any of your Bay Area outlets. They're all talking about Bryce Eldridge, why he's in the outfield, and what this means for his future, Elliot Ramos, and all that jazz. Now, I decided to go with the Chronicle with Shayna Rubin and what she had to say, why the Giants have top prospect Bryce Eldridge shagging balls in the outfield. And this is what Shayna writes: among players shagging fly balls in the Scottsdale Stadium backfields was an unexpected face. Bryce Eldridge, all 6'7" of them, roamed the outfield during the San Francisco Giants batting practice on Wednesday. It wasn't a casual assignment, but a directive from manager Tony Vitello, who told him to take shagging seriously, Eldridge said. So it's already starting. This is not just a, hey, hop out there, see how it feels. So Eldridge, typically a first baseman and designated hitter, grabbed outfielder Jung-Hoo Lee's glove and ran out to the grassy expanse. Outfielder Drew Gilbert was out there too, giving him pointers. I know that probably hurt Drew. I know that hurt Drew when you see more competition coming to the outfield. And real quick, just the note that he was using Jung-Hoo Lee's glove, that tells me that this really hadn't been talked about that much going into pitchers and catchers reporting. Maybe they thought later in spring training we would get there, but the dude doesn't even have an outfielder glove. Shayna goes on to write, Eldridge hadn't played in the outfield since 2023, the year he was drafted and converted to a full-time hitter. The Giants tried to find a position to stick with, giving him 26 starts in right field. That stint didn't go particularly well, as the Giants soon moved him to first base. He played 204 and a third innings in right field in the minors with 2 errors. I mean, that doesn't sound terrible off the top of my head. I never really got a chance to get comfortable out there, Eldridge said. I never played out there in high school, so for what it's worth, I felt comfortable enough. Obviously, it probably wasn't pretty. You can ask the low A San Jose coaches if it was pretty or not. I felt like I did a good job. But getting Eldridge outfield reps is a logical move for a team that could use roster versatility, and spring training is the right place to see whether Eldridge can get a feel for the position if the team needed to throw him into an outfield corner in a pinch. Any capability shown there could inch Eldridge close to an opening day roster spot. He spent the last 10 games of the regular season with the Giants, making his big league debut. He'll have the spring to earn a roster spot and regular at-bats at first base and DH. The power potential Eldridge could add is significant and a reason to carry him on the opening day roster. What has turned into a balanced lineup after the addition of Luis Arráez could grow even more explosive with Eldridge's bat alongside that of Rafael Devers, the other first baseman, and DH. Then she goes in to talk about Eldridge's numbers. Vitello said it would help the unpredictability of in-game decisions. It would help Vitello's flexibility with his lineup card if the Giants could throw Eldridge into the outfield. Always be ready, Eldridge said. We got Devers, we got Arráez, we got a lot of guys who can go and play first base and DH any chance I can get in the lineup. Eldridge is staying ready in case he's sent to the outfield again. His mom is shipping him his little used outfield glove from his Virginia hometown to Scottsdale. All right. So there it is for you. Obviously, if you are an outfielder, this is the worst news that you could ever hear. I'm sorry to the Grant McCrays, the Drew Gilberts, the Luis Matoses, the Elliot Ramoses. Now, it does sound like they're more so looking at him in left field, which makes sense because even though Elliot Ramos has struggled, that's one reason to do this. The other reason is because Elliot Ramos is right-handed and Bryce Eldridge is left-handed. So that would give Vitello a lot of flexibility there, even if it wasn't, strictly because Elliot Ramos is not hitting at all. It could also be, whether or not he's hitting against righty pitching, and maybe they think that it's a spot where Bryce Eldridge could slip in there. But this is definitely going to become a thing. I don't think it's going away. They're still trying to downplay it as if it's just, oh yeah, just go out there and see what happens. If you're Elliot Ramos, I don't really know how you should feel. It's crazy because the guys that we have really talked about all off season and whether or not they could stick or whatever the case may be, in Casey Schmidt and Elliot Ramos, they made it so close. They made it so close to the season. And then their whole, I guess, career trajectory, if you will, not so much Elliot Ramos, but with Casey Schmidt, it all got changed in the matter of weeks, right? The very end of the offseason with Luis Arráez joining, and now Bryce Eldridge starting off in the outfield as pitchers and catchers are reporting and spring training is just now getting underway. So if you're Elliot Ramos, I mean, look, you got to do what you got to do. And, this should put a fire under your butt to make sure that you're doing the best you can do to be an average outfielder, at worst. And I know he kind of started to figure out towards the end of the season. This has been something that last season was really bad, right? We know Elliot Ramos is probably not going to be, I always bring up Alex Gordon, probably not going to be Alex Gordon in left field, but he doesn't have to be atrocious. And last season, for the beginning of the season and kind of throughout the season, the end, he started to figure it out. He was not good. So when you're not good, then that gives people other ideas, because if we're already playing somebody who's not good at defense, then we're not giving up anything if we switch to a more offensive player. Now, Elliot Ramos did have a good season, right? So it's not as if hitting the baseball. So it's not as if, he's an eyesore out there the same way right field was. But Bryce Eldridge is a guy that can really shift some things around if he gets going a little bit. I was on KMBR yesterday and, they asked me some questions about Bryce Eldridge. And when I brought up the fact that I was a little bit confused as to what the Giants were doing with all these outfielders, everybody getting time out there, Papa hopped in and said, well, I don't think this is going to be an everyday thing. It's just for the flexibility. And I think he's right as far as right now. But once this thing gets rolling a bit, if Elliot Ramos slumps or whatever the case is, I just think that they have too many positions at the corners, which isn't really a bad thing. But it's not the type of flexibility that we typically talk about. It is flexibility, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same as, when you're talking about, hey, you got a guy that can play the infield, the outfield, and all of these things. Now, I guess technically Bryce could with the outfield and first base, but when you're talking about a corner, specifically left and first base, that's not the same thing, especially when you already have a ton of guys. You got Encarnacion, who people want to see if he can figure things out with the power that he has. Obviously, you got Devers, you got Arráez, who's going to start at second base. So you have a lot of guys already. I was reading something yesterday. I completely forgot that at one point, Casey Schmidt was at first base early on. So, I understand that it's better to just have people, a lot can happen throughout the season, but the fact that they're doing it already when Bryce is still trying to learn first base, that's still what's a bit concerning to me. Let's have him at least learn one position before you try to throw, other things at him. What do they say? Jack of all trades, master of none. And if you haven't really figured out the position that they decided you were going to play, now they're giving you a different position to kind of work on. Yeah, I don't know. I know we talked about this earlier in the week, but now that he's been out there, and we'll see what he looks like. Maybe he looks good, but let's say he looks great. What do you do with Elliot Ramos? Is he now the new person fighting for the DH? I will say, as far as Elliot Ramos as a DH, at least he's a righty bat, right? Because the problem with Arráez and obviously Bryce as well as Devers is they're all lefty. So that is a little bit wonky there, at least you can keep Elliot Ramos's bat in the lineup because he is a righty bat. So I do think that is something to keep in mind, because if he was fully out the lineup, you'd have a bunch of lefties, and you have a bunch of lefties fighting over there at first base and DH. So you do have some flexibility there with Elliot Ramos. So now that I think about it, that makes sense. I just want Bryce Eldridge to be able to focus on one thing. But maybe they feel as if, hey, he's not going to be that type of guy. I mean, how long do they have Rafi Devers? Rafi Devers isn't going anywhere. You know, his contract kind of lines up a little bit with Chapman. They're both within a year or so of each other. So Rafi's not going back to third base. Probably not. And probably not on the Giants. So they're probably looking, thinking, we don't really know when Bryce is going to play first base every day. So because of that, we have to make sure that he's prepared at maybe a different position, which again makes me think this is more than just yeah, you see how it feels out there, right? And I think that's what Shayna wrote. This did not feel, you know, random, because you don't do random stuff on the very first day of spring training when it's your first opportunity as a manager. This is something that Vitello and probably the front office has been thinking about. On the other side, let's get to some of Tony Vitello's notes that he has had so far. Jeff Young of Around the Foghorn kind of broke them down, so we will give you a lay of the land there. More Locked On Giants coming up. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right there in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Giants with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more. All for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to LockedOnSFGiants@supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. If you're a true diehard Giants fan, the Everydayer All Access tier is built for you. You'll get one-on-one text access with me, all access episodes, an exclusive newsletter, and a 15% discount to the Locked On merch store. Head to LockedOnSFGiants@supercast.com to join the Everydayer Club and unlock all access. You can also find a link in the show notes. Next segment with you, and we have some notes from Tony Vitello, the first day or so. It's spring training with pitchers and catchers reporting, and Jeff Young kind of broke some of these notes down for us of Around the Foghorn. So some notes from Tony Vitello. Ron Washington and Frank Anderson will travel with the team. Washington was not heavily considered for third base coach. Vitello said he studied Anderson when he was coming up as a coach. He believes Jesse Chavez's long career will help him relate to players, has a hands-off approach with his coaches, hired them to do a job, and has confidence that they will. First base coach Shane Robinson will also work with the outfielders, wanted to have some continuity from the prior staff. As far as the players, Blade Tidwell, Carson Wisenhunt, and Hayden Birdsong have caught his attention so far. He recruited Michael Fulmer when he was going to college, but verbally committed to Arkansas before getting drafted. Said Eric Miller worked out extensively at Oracle Park this off season. So great stuff from Jeff. One of the notes that I wanted to focus on was obviously the pitchers, because I think that's just clearly the most important part here. And yeah, I've obviously been very vocal about Blade Tidwell and what I'm hoping to see from him. But this Hayden Birdsong thing, you know, the two storylines that keep getting brought up right now, Bryce Eldridge in the outfield and Hayden Birdsong as a possible closer. I've seen somebody say he would be a great eighth inning guy as well. But one thing that we continue to hear that I think a lot of people, myself included, kind of got turned off from when Hayden Birdsong was struggling is that Hayden Birdsong has some of the best stuff in the Giants organization. And that's what they'll tell you. And we've heard that time and time again. And we're seeing it come up on different platforms from different voices and different, whether it's a media member, or whether it's somebody within the organization. I don't know that myself, and I won't speak for you, but I don't know that a lot of us realize how highly they speak of Hayden Birdsong and how much they think he could unlock this rotation and this pitching staff as a whole, whether that's as a closer, whether that's as a starter, whether that's as a relief guy, whatever it is, long relief, middle relief, whatever it is. Hayden Birdsong is that dude to them. And the fact that things went so squirrely for him last season, I think did throw a wrench in what the Giants believed that they did have going into that season. And I think it is incredibly important for them to find a way to get him back on track. And if they can't get him back on track, I think they would look at this as a miss. I don't want to say as big as a Marco Luciano, but from a pitching perspective, I believe the more I hear everyone talk about Hayden Birdsong, this is somebody that they thought was really, really going to change the trajectory of their pitching staff. Like when you look at what Landon Roop ended up doing and you look at what some of these other young guys have been able to do, that's exactly what they were expecting from Hayden Birdsong, if not more. So this is going to be, I think, one of the biggest storylines. Can they find a way to get Hayden Birdsong back on track? It's been a while since I've talked about that sports psychology, but y'all that been listening to me and watching me for a while, you know I brought it up a lot during the season. If there is some type of sports psychology that Hayden Birdsong needs, because I think it is a version of the yips, you know, and we've all struggled with some version of the yips. I struggled with it as an outfielder, right? You start overthinking everything. Did I always squeeze my glove? You know what it turns into? Are you ever eating a meal and just for whatever reason, you look down at your hand and you think for a second, I'm holding this fork in a very specific way. And then you start overthinking how you're holding the fork. Maybe it's just me, but that has happened to me time and time again. When you don't think about it, I couldn't even tell you how I hold a fork right now. But there are times where you're eating and you're thinking, this is weird, right? Or why am I holding a fork like this? This is very kind of random to me. And you start overthinking things, right? When you spell something, a word that comes up a lot is pajamas, right? Somebody says, have you ever thought about how weird the word pajama is, or any word out there? You think that is a weird word, but when you're going throughout your day, you're not overthinking it. This is all kind of a version of the yips, if you will. And I think Hayden Birdsong really does have the yips, and he's going to work to try to figure this thing out. And it ain't easy, right? Whether it's what major league or whatever the case is, trying to throw back to the pitcher, it's not an easy thing to overcome. So I hope that Hayden is able to overcome it and able to figure this thing out, but it's not simple at all. And if anybody can figure it out, I believe this is where Tony Vitello excels, right? He'll be very open with you. It's not about him, hey, your leg, or you're opening up your shoulder, or you're not pointing to your target. But Tony Vitello, why you brought him in, and Buster Posey, he did say, I like listening to Tony Vitello talk, but Buster Posey brought him in because on top of all of the X's and O's and those types of things, that's not necessarily what a manager is focused on, right? A manager is focused on, hey, who is performing? How do I get those who aren't performing to perform at a higher level and allow us to go from there? It's not the same as a coach, if you will. That's why they don't call a major league manager a coach, right? Literally. So Hayden Birdsong, I think, is the most important piece heading into 2026 this season, because if you are able to unlock him, I think that the Giants rotation, the same way Luis Arraez lengthened out that lineup, he could lengthen out that rotation and give a lot of people, you know, a much better feeling on what the Giants are going to be able to do this season. One more segment with you. Let's hear from Jeff Passan, an update on where things stand on the lockout and whether or not this thing could actually turn around before it's too late. More Locked On Giants coming up. So this is from Jeff Passan. I'm not necessarily going to go through the whole article, but he's basically just talking about Kyle Tucker, what Kyle Tucker's Dodgers contract means for MLB labor piece. He says, there is a group of fans who are angry at baseball. There are a lot of them, and they do not exist only on social media. They are inside of group chats that talk about how much money the Dodgers are spending after winning the past 2 World Series. And they are in cities big and small that look at the Dodgers with envy and masked eye rolls and curses. And they might just want to devote more time to the game. Maybe they love the pitch clock or Shohei Ohtani or Aaron Judge or the in-person vibe or any number of things about the game today worth loving. But they're not sure the whole thing is fair. Owners are angry too. Their franchise valuations aren't growing as quickly as their billionaire peers in other sports, and they blame the system that governs Major League Baseball. They don't like it. Nearly every owner believes MLB needs a salary cap. Its presence, owners say, immediately would juice franchise values with the labor costs essentially fixed and no more chasing Dodgers teams spending $500 million annually on players. At the same time, they say it would provide a pathway to competitive balance, which they believe is entirely out of whack. They think a salary cap will fix everything, even if it jeopardizes the 2027 season. Players are also angry at what feels to them like an inevitability that after the current collective bargaining agreement expires on December 1st, the owners are going to lock them out and shut down the game with no end in sight. At the creeping notion, MLB not only is going to propose a cap in the bargaining leading up to the expiration, but will hold firm on its inclusion in further offers. At the reality that a majority of fans in public and private polling support MLB adopting a capped system, more out of familiarity than any sort of compelling argument for it compared with alternative structures, the players simply want to ball and receive a fair portion of the $12 billion plus revenue the league generates annually. Their ability to do both, they say, shouldn't be neutered by owners who 4 years ago voted unanimously in favor of the system they now deride. So just to take a quick breather here, I mean, the reality is things change. I'm not necessarily saying that the owners are right, but I guess they have a right to change their mind within 4 years if they see something that is not working correctly and it's their money. So, I mean, that's just kind of what it is. I'm going to skip to the bottom here. The longer fans feel alienated, the further franchise values serve as the divine purpose of owners, the more the union denies that the growing payroll gap is a short and long-term issue, the likelier baseball is to wither toward the latter. Open-mindedness, creative thinking, clear communication, these are not simply buzzwords. They're necessities to salvage a relationship as poisoned as that between the league and the union. And he closes with this: how long owners have the stomach to stick with the cap proposal will guide these negotiations. They are the ones trying to introduce radical change to a system that has existed for more than half a century, fed up with standard operating procedure, lighter and gas in hand. They know that if baseball goes away, no matter the reason, people will find other things to do with their lives. Owners hear that and remain staunch, assured, posturing with righteous indignation as their paying customers say in unison, a mantra bound to get louder. Whatever it takes, please just figure it out and don't screw up our game. So great stuff. You can check out the whole thing on ESPN.com. And that was, again, Jeff Passan. So, yeah, it's kind of a push-pull here. You have one side of it where the owners do feel like they have a level of leverage because it's their money and they want to make sure that they're making it as much as the NFL, as the NBA, as their peers. On the other side of it, if you turn off fans and this thing takes too long, if the players decide, well, we're not going for it, and we don't think that you are able to stomach the fact that no baseball is being played, you're losing even more money, then you have a push-pull where the owners have to make a decision. So, I mean, if I were to guess, but again, at some point, you know, the players would be in a tough spot because Major League Baseball would also be losing and, you know, new contracts wouldn't be happening and things of that nature. And you're not playing the game you love. How about I start there? So it's a very, very dicey situation, which is why nobody necessarily knows where this thing is headed. I mean, I'll say this: owners do appreciate their money and they like their money, but if they feel as if they're not getting the most out of their investment, they are willing to stand strong, you know, and they are willing to say, look, we might lose the battle, to win the war. And the players, eventually, they're going to have to make a decision because we pay you, right? We're billionaires. And billionaires, one thing I've learned, billionaires did not become billionaires by going soft on their stances. They did not become billionaires by bending at the knee to anybody, really. So I'm not necessarily sure who has more leverage, but normally billionaires get what they want. And I think the tough thing, I really hate doing this, but I think the tough thing, because they're billionaires, and if you're making so much money in a league, yeah, players deserve their piece of the pie, but it is going to be hard for fans to stomach uh, players being upset that you're making 20 million a year versus, I don't know, 30 million a year, whatever the change is. I understand that's not our money. I understand that that's pocket watching. I understand that if we were in the position of the players, we'd probably feel the same way as them. But for us normal folk, and again, hey, you get mad at the players, but you're not getting mad at the billionaires. But hey, for us normal folk, it is a tough situation where you're thinking, hey, I mean, you're playing a kid's game. How much money do you really need? Are you really willing to say no to this based on a salary cap that all of your peers already have? You can look at it and say, you've been making out for half a century. And they finally came to say, hey, we can't do this anymore. You're still going to make millions and millions of dollars. What's the problem? So I could see fans being very torn on this, and some fans saying, no, the players deserve whatever they deserve. If the league is making this much money and the owners want to take away more money, then what are we talking about? There's also the piece, if you're a Pirates fan, if you are a Reds fan, if you are a fan of a smaller market, that you probably would like the salary cap and salary floor, an A's fan, so that your team has to pay more money, but there's also a cap. So I think everybody, or a lot of people, would agree to that. So I don't know where this thing is going to go. I feel the same way Jeff Passan does. Just don't screw up our game and find a way to get it done. If you're the players, I'm not ever going to tell you to take less money. That's not something I would do. I understand capitalism, but it will get to a point where I don't know how much fans are going to say, hey, I understand what you're doing. You deserve 35 million, 20 million. What are you going to do with that a year? I understand why fans, because even myself, I'm thinking, I mean, I understand the billionaires are the billionaires, but you're still doing pretty well from where I'm standing, which maybe isn't fair, but I think a lot of fans are going to feel like that too. Thank you for listening to Locked On Giants. Thank you for watching Locked On Giants. Be sure to follow me on social media at @the_Styles Files, Styles with an I. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is for you. Get Locked On Giants ad free, plus members only Discord access and more. Head to Locked On sfgiants at supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you make your second listen Locked On MLB. We will talk to you tomorrow on a beautiful Friday. Until then, peace.